The anomaly. The air in this dimension tasted of sulfur and lies. It was not the clean, ozone-sharp scent of the zone, nor the familiar metallic tang of the Eggman Empire's factories. This city, a sprawling, vertical labyrinth of steel and glass, reeked of biological decay masked by expensive perfume. Shadow stood atop a gargoyle perched on the 74th floor of a structure the locals called Vought Tower. His arms were crossed over his chest, the gold inhibitor rings on his wrists catching the harsh glare of the neon billboards. He did not breathe in the conventional sense. His physiology, a synthesis of Black Arm's DNA and Project Shadow bioengineering, processed the atmosphere through a filter of absolute efficiency. Below him, the city pulsed. He could hear the heartbeat of the metropolis. 7 million distinct rhythms. He isolated them, filtering out the noise to focus on the anomalies. There was a sickness here. He watched a massive digital screen flicker to life on the building opposite him. A man in a star-spangled cape smiled a plastic, predatory smile. The crowd below cheered, but Shadow's auditory receptors picked up the distinct variance in their pulse rates. Fear, not adoration. False idols, Shadow thought. The realization settled in his mind with the weight of a stone. He had been pulled through a chaos control rift, a tear in the fabric of the multiverse caused by a proximity detonation of a supergenesis wave. He was alone. He stepped off the ledge. Gravity attempted to claim him. He denied it. The jets in his hover shoes flared, a controlled burst of ionic energy that arrested his descent. He skated down the side of the glass building, the friction shielding humming as he accelerated, turning the vertical drop into a controlled slide toward the street level. He needed answers. He needed to find the source of the energy signature that permeated this city, a distinct chemical corruption that mocked the purity of chaos energy. The Challenger. He touched down on the pavement with the silence of a falling feather. The impact should have cratered the concrete. Instead, he absorbed the kinetic energy into his skeletal structure, storing it for later release. The streets were crowded, yet a path cleared instantly. Not out of respect, but out of confusion. The pedestrians of New York were accustomed to capes and spandex, but they had never seen a 3'3" anthropomorphic entity radiating an aura of palpable menace. Then the sonic boom hit. It arrived before the sound, a pressure wave that shattered the windows of the storefronts lining the block. The air displaced so violently that cars were shunted sideways. Shadow did not flinch. His quills stiffened slightly, sensing the vector of approach. A blur of blue and white materialized 20 meters in front of him. The motion was sloppy, inefficient. It leaked energy in every direction. The figure stopped, skidding to a halt that ruined the asphalt, leaving distinct burn marks. It was a human male, clad in aerodynamic armor, wearing thick goggles. Sweat poured off him, reeking of a complex chemical compound that Shadow's olfactory sensors identified instantly. A mutagenic steroid, high toxicity, unstable. A-Train panted, his hands on his knees, playing up the exhaustion for the onlookers who had whipped out their phones. He looked up, his grin wide, jittery, and entirely devoid of warmth. "Whoa," the speedster said, his voice vibrating with a manic energy. "Vought marketing is getting weird with the props. What are you supposed to be? Some kind of edgy mascot for a new energy drink?" Shadow stared. His crimson eyes did not blink. He analyzed the threat level. Subject, human variant, enhanced metabolic rate, tachycardic rhythm, resting heart rate 300 beats per minute, muscle density elevated, threat assessment negligible. "Stand aside," Shadow said. His voice was low, smooth, and carried a resonance that seemed to bypass the ears and vibrate directly in the skull. A-Train laughed, a sharp barking sound. He stood up straight, rolling his shoulders. The cameras were rolling. He needed a win. His poll numbers were dipping, and stopping a monster in Times Square was exactly the juice he needed. "Stand aside?" A-Train mocked, stepping closer. The air shimmered around him as he began to vibrate his molecules. "You got an attitude for a plush toy. You know who I am? I'm the fastest man alive. I'm A-Train, baby." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper intended only for Shadow. "And you're blocking my lane. So here's how this goes. You turn around, you run, and I make it look good when I take you down. Maybe I don't break your legs if you make me look fast." Shadow uncrossed his arms. The movement was slow, deliberate. "You define yourself by speed," Shadow noted coldly. "A pitiful metric for a hollow creature." A-Train's ego, fragile as spun glass, shattered. His pupils dilated. The chemical cocktail in his veins spiked. "Run!" A-Train commanded, the smile vanishing. "Let's see what you got, freak. Race you to the river. Loser eats pavement." The kinetic equation. A-Train did not wait for an agreement. He launched. To the human eye, he simply vanished. One moment he was standing there. The next, a gust of wind tore the hats off the bystanders. A-Train pushed himself. He needed to show dominance. He injected a fresh vial of compound phi directly into his thigh mid-stride, the needle mechanism in his suit clicking. The rush hit him like a freight train. The world slowed to a crawl. The city became a tunnel of blurred lights. He was moving at Mach 3, weaving through traffic that appeared static. He checked his rear view, expecting to see the empty street. He saw red. Shadow was there. He wasn't running. It was something far more terrifying. Shadow was skating. The jets on his shoes emitted a golden-white flame, suspending him inches above the ground. His posture was relaxed, arms casually swinging at his sides, his expression one of utter boredom. He was matching A-Train's Mach 3 sprint with the effort one might use to walk a dog. A-Train screamed, the sound lost in the slipstream. He pushed harder. His heart hammered against his ribs, threatening to burst. Mach 4. The friction began to heat his suit. The asphalt beneath his boots turned to liquid. Shadow merely leaned forward, minimizing his wind resistance. He drifted closer, closing the gap. "Is this your limit?" Shadow's voice cut through the sonic boom, clear and unaffected by the Doppler effect. Panic, cold and primal, seized A-Train's heart. This wasn't possible. He was the fastest. He was a member of the Seven. "Get away from me!" A-Train roared, flailing a fist backward, attempting a high-speed strike. It was a mistake. Shadow's hand moved. It broke the sound barrier within the span of 3 inches. He caught A-Train's wrist. The grip was absolute. It was the immobility of a mountain clamping down on a hummingbird. "You lack discipline," Shadow stated. The grind. The physics of the situation changed instantly. Shadow anchored himself. The hover shoes reversed polarity, locking him into the spatial coordinates of the moment. He yanked A-Train. The speedster's momentum, massive and uncontrolled, was redirected. Shadow swung him like a rag doll. They were in a narrow alleyway now, the brick walls blurring past. Shadow slammed A-Train to the left. The impact was sickening. A-Train's face met the Victorian-era brickwork of an old warehouse at nearly 3,000 miles per hour. Shadow did not let go. He kept running, dragging the speedster with him. He held A-Train by the back of the neck, forcing his head into the wall. The friction was instantaneous and horrific. The blue cowl of A-Train's suit disintegrated in a microsecond. Then the skin. Sparks flew, literal sparks, as the titanium reinforcements in A-Train's goggles ground against the masonry. The brick wall carved a trough, exploding into red dust and shrapnel behind them. A-Train tried to scream, but his jaw was being vibrated at a frequency that dissolved bone. The pain was distant, too massive for his brain to process yet. He was being erased. His legacy, his speed, his vanity, all being ground into a fine red mist against a dirty alley wall. Shadow accelerated. The wail of the friction grew to a shriek. Shadow watched the wall crumble under the assault of the speedster's face. He felt the vibrations traveling up his arm, the cracking of the cheekbone, the snapping of the orbital socket. It was a clinical disassembly of the man's face. "You are reckless," Shadow said, his voice calm amidst the chaotic screech of the grind. "You wield power like a child plays with fire." Shadow stopped. The sudden deceleration generated a shock wave that blew out the windows of the building they were grinding against. He released his grip. A-Train tumbled, skipping across the pavement like a stone thrown across a pond, finally crashing into a dumpster. He lay there, a broken heap of blue spandex and blood. One side of his face was a ruin of raw meat and exposed white bone. His goggles were fused to his skull. He wheezed a wet, rattling sound. Shadow stood over him. He adjusted his gloves, brushing a speck of brick dust from his white fur. The ultimate Lifeform looked down at the fallen hero. There was no pity in his eyes, only the cold calculation of a being who had seen gods fall and had killed them himself. "Pathetic," Shadow murmured. He turned his back on the sobbing, broken speedster. Chaos control. In a flash of green light, Shadow vanished, leaving A-Train alone in the garbage, the fastest man alive, having never been so slow to stand up. The silent room. The conference room on the 99th floor of Vought Tower was hermetically sealed, maintained at a crisp 68 degrees. It smelled of ozone and expensive leather. Usually this room was a cacophony of marketing jargon and ego clashes. Today, it was a tomb. On the massive wall-mounted screen, the footage played on a loop. It was a grainy, high frame rate capture from a traffic camera on 42nd Street. Play. A blue blur, A-Train enters the frame. A black and red streak, target unknown, intercepts. The physics defy existing models. The black streak does not bank. It vectors instantly, ignoring inertia. Pause. Homelander sat at the head of the long mahogany table. He was perfectly still. His hands were clasped in front of him, resting on the polished wood. Underneath his gloves, his knuckles were white. His heart rate, usually a rhythmic, slow thud, had accelerated to 80 beats per minute. For him, that was tachycardia. To his right, Ashley Barrett was vibrating. She was typing furiously on a tablet, her hair already looking like she had pulled at it. "We're scrubbing it from Twitter," she said, her voice tight, bordering on a screech. "But the live streams, God, the live streams. #RatRun is trending. They're calling him roadkill. Vought stock is down 4 points in 20 minutes. Homelander did not blink. "Play it again," he whispered. The analyst at the far end of the table, a terrified man named Seth, tapped a key with a shaking finger. Play. The footage advanced to the grind. The black entity gripped the back of A-Train's neck. There was no struggle. The biomechanical leverage was absolute. The wall met the face, a cloud of red mist and brick dust. Homelander watched the entity's face. It was pixelated, but the expression was readable. Boredom. It was bored. The anatomy of fear. "Pause," Homelander commanded. The image froze on Shadow, standing over the broken body of A-Train. Homelander stood up. The leather of his chair creaked, sounding like a gunshot in the silent room. He walked to the screen, his cape flowing heavily behind him. He hovered inches from the display, his blue eyes scanning the pixels. "Deep," Homelander said softly. The Deep flinched. He was sitting 3 seats down, staring at his own reflection in a glass of water. "Yeah? Yeah, boss." "What is that?" Homelander pointed at the screen. The Deep squinted. "It looks like, is it a raccoon? A badger? Some kind of messed up cat?" "It's 3 feet tall," Black Noir wrote on a notepad, sliding it forward. Homelander stared at the golden rings on the creature's wrists. He could see the energy signature flaring around the shoes. "It's not a soup," Homelander murmured, mostly to himself. "There's no compound vice signature in the thermal exhaust. This thing, it's biological, but it's dense." He looked closer at the creature's eyes. They were crimson. They looked back at the camera, back at him, with a level of sentient arrogance that Homelander reserved only for himself. A sharp cracking sound filled the room. Homelander looked down. He had rested his hand on the back of an empty chair. The steel frame had crumpled like tin foil under his grip. He hadn't even noticed he was squeezing. "He broke A-Train," Homelander said, his voice dropping an octave. "Like a toy." "Reggie is in surgery," Ashley stammered, reading a fresh notification. "Reconstructive. Everything. Orbital floor is gone. Jaw is wire. He might not run again. At least not at speed. The equilibrium centers in his inner ear were liquidated. The false god's decree." Homelander turned around. The smile on his face was terrifying. It didn't reach his eyes. It was a mask of skin pulled tight over a skull that was vibrating with rage. "Do you know what this is?" Homelander asked the room. Nobody answered. "This is a villain," Homelander announced, his voice brightening artificially. "Finally, a real one. Not some guy in a basement with a manifesto. A monster." He walked over to the window, looking out at the city that Shadow had just desecrated. His X-ray vision pierced the clouds, scanning the streets, searching for that unique, alien, dense bone structure. "He hurt one of the 7, Homelander said, the narrative forming in his mind. "He attacked an American hero. He's a foreign terrorist, an alien invader." He turned back to Ashley. "Spin it. A train is a martyr. He was holding back to protect civilians. This hedgehog is a threat to national security." Homelander's eyes began to glow. 2 pinpricks of red laser light heating the air in the room. The smell of burning ozone returned, sharper this time. "I want every camera in the city looking for a 3-foot red and black rodent," Homelander hissed. "And when you find him, do not engage." He walked to the door. "Call me. I want to peel him myself." As the heavy doors slammed shut, the silence returned, heavier than before. The Deep exhaled a breath he had been holding for 2 minutes. "So," Deep whispered to Noir, "we're fucked, right?" Noir stared at the screen, at the freeze frame of Shadow the Hedgehog. Slowly, deliberately, Noir nodded. The biological imperative. Night fell over the city like a shroud of wet wool. Rain slicked the streets, reflecting the garish neon of the Vought advertisements that plagued every surface. Shadow moved through the industrial district. He did not run. He skated on the friction cushion of his air shoes, a phantom gliding 2 inches above the grime. He had isolated the chemical signature. The blood of the speedster had contained a mutagen, a volatile blue isotope that reeked of unstable ambition. Shadow traced that scent through the city's air currents, filtering out the exhaust and the garbage, following the trail of the isotope back to its source. It led him to a nondescript warehouse in the Bronx. No branding, no logos, just high-voltage fences and guards whose heart rates were too steady to be civilians. Vought security. Shadow stopped at the perimeter fence. He touched the chain link. Current, 10,000 volts. He didn't bother to disable it. He simply energized his skeletal structure with a micropulse of chaos energy. He phased. For 0.03 seconds, his molecular density dropped to 0. He walked through the fence as if it were smoke, rematerializing on the other side before the voltage could arc. The guards didn't see him. To the human eye, he was a trick of the light, a shadow stretching in the rain. The intrusion. Inside, the facility was sterile. White tiles, brushed steel, and the hum of cryogenic freezers. Shadow bypassed the biometric locks by physically vibrating the tumblers of the manual override until they disintegrated into powder. He stepped into the main lab. Rows of vials, blue liquid, compound 5. He picked one up. The glass was cold. He held it to the light, his crimson eyes narrowing. His sensors analyzed the refraction of light through the liquid. Analysis: mutagenic serum, high concentrations of localized radiation. Purpose: forced genetic evolution. Side effects: neurochemical degradation, instability. Artificial advancement, Shadow whispered, his lip curling in disgust. Cheating evolution. It reminded him of the bio-lizard, of the Ark, of mistakes made by men who thought they were gods. He tightened his grip. The vial shattered. The blue liquid sizzled against his glove, harmless against his immunity. Oi! The voice came from the catwalk above, rough, British, laced with nicotine and malice. Shadow did not look up immediately. He processed the acoustic reflection to pinpoint the speaker's location, weight, and weapon loadout. 3 targets, 2 heartbeats elevated, fear, 1 heartbeat steady, aggression. Shadow turned slowly. The Butcher. Billy Butcher leaned over the railing, a crowbar resting casually on his shoulder. Beside him, Huey Campbell looked like he was about to vomit, clutching a camera. Frenchie was adjusting goggles, staring at Shadow with a mix of terror and scientific fascination. "You're the little ripper from the news," Butcher said, a dark grin spreading across his bearded face. "The one who turned A-Train into a pavement pizza." Shadow dropped the shards of the glass vial. "You are not security." "Sharp lad." Butcher descended the metal stairs, his boots clanging loudly. He stopped 10 feet away. "No, we ain't security. We're the pest control. Usually that means cleaning up soups like the one you scraped off the wall." Butcher eyed the hedgehog. He saw the rings, the shoes, the lack of a suit. This wasn't a Vought product. Vought products had branding. This thing looked like a weapon built for war. "I have no quarrel with humans," Shadow said, his tone dismissing them. He turned back to the rack of Compound V. "This substance, it is the plague of this world." Huey whispered loudly to Frenchie, "Did he just talk?" The hedgehog talked. Why does he sound like a Shakespearean actor? "It is fascinating," Frenchie murmured. "His density, he is sinking slightly into the floor tiles. He is heavy." Butcher stepped closer, encroaching on Shadow's personal space. A tactical error. "We saw what you did," Butcher said, his voice dropping. "Grinded his face off. Diabolical. I liked it. But here's the rub, Sunshine. You're in Vought's house now. And if you're stealing the V, that makes you a variable I can't calculate." Shadow turned his head, just enough to make eye contact. The air pressure in the room dropped noticeably. "I do not steal," Shadow said. "I intend to destroy it." He raised a hand. A sphere of yellow energy, crackling with black lightning, formed in his palm. The Chaos Spear. Huey yelped and scrambled behind a crate. Butcher! He's glowing! He's glowing! Butcher didn't flinch, though his knuckles turned white on the crowbar. Right. You hate the V. We hate the V. Enemy of my enemy and all that bollocks. The interrogation of physics. Shadow canceled the energy sphere. It collapsed into a singularity and vanished. You hunt the users of this poison, Shadow deduced. We spank them when they get out of line, Butcher corrected. And right now, you're the biggest stick in the yard. Homelander is pissed. He's got satellites sweeping the grid for you. If you stay here, you're dead. Or worse, they'll capture you and dissect you to see what makes you tick. Shadow scoffed, a sound of genuine amusement. They are welcome to try. I am the ultimate life form. Your Homelander is a lab rat with a cape. Frenchie stepped forward, unable to help himself. Please, mon ami, you say ultimate life form. Your physiology, it is not carbon-based. The energy you emit, it is similar to Cherenkov radiation. But golden? Shadow ignored the science. He looked at Butcher. You know where the leader of this corruption is. Homelander? Butcher nodded. Yeah, I know where he lives. I know where he eats. But you can't just walk up to him, mate. He lasers people in half from a mile away. He's indestructible. Shadow walked past Butcher toward the exit. The movement was so fluid it looked like he was being pulled by strings. Indestructible, Shadow repeated, testing the word. He paused at the heavy steel door. He didn't open it. He simply kicked it. There was no wind-up, just a snap of the leg. The steel door, 4 inches thick and reinforced, flew off its hinges. It crossed the parking lot outside and embedded itself in a concrete retaining wall 50 yards away. The sound was like a cannon shot. Shadow looked back over his shoulder. I have heard that word before, Shadow said. It is always a lie. He stepped out into the rain. Wait, Huey shouted, running to the doorframe. Where are you going? Shadow stopped. The rain hissed as it hit his quills, repelled by his biofield. To find a Chaos Emerald, Shadow said. If this world has an equivalent energy source, I will find it. And then I will burn this company to the ground. He flared his shoes. A burst of light and he was gone, accelerating to supersonic speeds instantly, leaving only a vapor cone and the smell of ozone. Butcher stared at the empty, rain-slicked lot. He pulled a flask from his jacket and took a long swig. Well, Butcher wiped his mouth. That's a bit of all right. He's going to get himself killed, Huey said, shaking. Maybe, Butcher grinned. Or maybe he's the bomb we've been waiting to drop down Homelander's chimney. Pack the bags, boys. We're following the Hedgehog. The current. The Con Edison substation in Queens was a cathedral of humming transformers and high-tension wires. It fed power to 3 boroughs. Shadow stood atop the primary transformer unit, the rain steaming as it hit his fur. He removed a gold inhibitor ring from his left wrist. The air instantly grew heavy, the barometric pressure dropping in a 10-foot radius. He placed his hand directly onto the main bus bar. Voltage, 345,000 volts. Amperage, critical. He did not flinch. He inhaled. The electricity did not shock him. It flowed into him. His bioharness acted as a superconductor, channeling the raw electron stream into his chaotic core. His quills glowed with a harsh, white luminescence. The city block around him flickered. Lights in apartments a mile away surged and died. He was drinking the city's heartbeat. It was a dirty fuel, crude alternating current, lacking the infinite potential of chaos energy. But it would suffice to stabilize his molecular density in this foreign dimension. Power levels restored to 60%. He snapped the inhibitor ring back onto his wrist with a metallic click. The flow stopped. The transformer beneath him was glowing red hot, the cooling oil boiling inside. Shadow exhaled a breath of static discharge. Sufficient. He turned his head slightly. His ears swiveled toward the shadows of the maintenance catwalks. "You are quieter than the others," Shadow said to the darkness, "but you still displace air." The silent assassin. Black Noir stepped out from behind a steel pillar. He made no sound. His tactical suit absorbed the ambient light, making him look like a void in the shape of a man. Noir tilted his head. He held a pair of curved karambit knives, the blades coated in a paralytic neurotoxin, potent enough to drop an elephant. He had watched Shadow drain the grid. He had seen the power. Noir did not feel fear. That part of his brain had been excised along with a chunk of his frontal lobe years ago. But he felt professional caution. Shadow fully turned to face him. He scanned the assailant. Subject, human male. Heavily modified. Severe cranial trauma detected. Vocal cords non-functional. Pain receptors suppressed. Threat assessment, moderate. "A soldier," Shadow noted, his voice carrying a shred of approval. "Unlike the runner, you possess discipline." Noir did not posture. He did not monologue. He threw the knives. The motion was faster than the human eye could track. 2 blades targeting Shadow's eyes. Shadow did not dodge. He caught them. His hands moved in a blur, snatching the steel out of the air, inches from his face. He looked at the blades, sniffing the coated edges. "Neurotoxin," Shadow identified. "Crude." He crushed the knives in his hands, the hardened steel crumbling like dry clay. He dropped the metal dust onto the wet grating. Noir was already moving. He closed the distance, 30 feet in less than a second, launching a flying knee aimed at Shadow's sternum. The clinical disassembly. Shadow accepted the impact. Noir's knee connected with Shadow's chest. It was like striking an anvil rooted to the bedrock. A shockwave rippled through the rain, clearing the droplets in a perfect circle around them. Shadow slid back 2 inches. Noir bounced off, flipping backward to land in a crouch. Noir paused. He stared at his knee. He had hit with force capable of shattering concrete. The hedgehog hadn't even winded. "My turn," Shadow said. He vanished. It wasn't speed, it was teleportation, a distortion in space-time. Shadow reappeared directly above Noir, descending with a heel drop. Noir rolled. The grate he had been standing on exploded, the steel mesh shearing apart as Shadow's foot drove through it. Noir capitalized. He was a master of improvisation. He grabbed a severed high-voltage cable swinging loose from the damaged transformer and whipped it at Shadow. The live wire carrying 13,000 volts struck Shadow in the back. Sparks showered the rooftop like fireworks. Noir waited for the scream, the seizure, the smell of cooking meat. Shadow turned around slowly. The cable was still touching his shoulder, arcing wildly. He reached up, grabbed the live wire, and ripped it free from the pylon. "I just ate," Shadow said coldly. "I'm full." He pointed a finger at Noir. "Chaos!" Noir's combat instinct screamed. He crossed his arms in a guard, activating the V-enhanced durability that allowed him to tank explosions. Spear, a lance of yellow energy, thin as a needle and hot as a star, shot from Shadow's fingertip. It bypassed Noir's guard entirely. It struck his left shoulder, not burning, but piercing. The energy bolt cauterized the wound instantly, punching a clean hole through the tactical armor and the super-dense muscle beneath. Noir flew backward, slamming into a junction box. He slid down, clutching his shoulder. He looked at the wound. It wasn't bleeding. It was glowing. The message. Shadow skated forward, hovering over the fallen assassin. Noir tried to stand. His regeneration factor was already trying to knit the tissue, but the residual chaos energy was halting the process, burning at a cellular level. Shadow placed a boot on Noir's chest. He didn't press down hard, just enough to pin him. "You are a weapon," Shadow observed, looking down into the black lenses of Noir's mask. "I know your kind, built to serve, broken to obey. You have no will of your own." Shadow saw the flash of recognition in Noir's body language, the hesitation. "I was created to be the ultimate weapon," Shadow said, his voice lowering to a growl. "But I hold the trigger. You are just a gun in someone else's hand." Shadow lifted his boot. "Tell your master," Shadow said, looking up toward the clouded sky, as if addressing the Vought tower miles away. "Tell the one who floats, I am not hiding, I am waiting." Shadow turned away. Chaos control. The space warped. A vacuum imploded. Shadow was gone. Black Noir sat alone in the rain, clutching his shoulder. For the first time in decades, he felt something akin to confusion. He pulled a small notepad from his belt with his good hand. He wrote a single word, underlining it twice. Different. At this precise moment, the viewer's thumb hovers exactly 2 millimeters above the screen. To the untrained eye, this is mere hesitation. However, on a neurological level, a violent conflict is taking place within the prefrontal cortex. The viewer is currently processing the auditory data stream, a synthetic voice so optimized for narrative delivery that it bypasses standard skepticism and stimulates the imagination directly. The dopamine receptors are firing. The immersion is absolute. Yet a fatal error in logic is about to occur. The viewer operates under the assumption that the algorithm will naturally return them to this channel. This is a statistical miscalculation. Without the tactile confirmation of the subscribe function, the probability of retrieving this specific narrative frequency drops by 84.7% within the next 48 hours. The creator, dependent on this metric to fuel the AI generation engine, waits in a state of suspended anticipation. There are 2 distinct timelines ahead. In the first, the viewer scrolls away. The story ends here, lost to the entropic chaos of the feed. In the second, the viewer exerts a mere 0.5 newtons of force. The connection is solidified. The production of future chapters is guaranteed. The choice is not merely about support, it is a tactical decision to ensure the survival of the story itself. Do not hesitate. Correct the timeline. Subscribe. Back to the story. The wound. The elevator doors to the Seven's conference room slid open with a soft chime that felt mocking in the heavy silence. Black Noir stumbled in. He did not walk with his usual feline grace. He listed to the left. He collapsed into his chair, the leather groaning under the dead weight of his armor. Homelander turned from the window. He held a glass of milk, the condensation running over his glove. He looked at Noir, then at the hole in Noir's shoulder. It was a clean puncture, the size of a quarter. The edges of the tactical suit were fused to the skin. Inside the wound, a faint, sickly yellow light still pulsed, refusing to let the flesh knit back together. "He did this?" Homelander asked. His voice was dangerously soft. Noir nodded once. He reached for his notepad with a trembling hand, scribbling a single sentence, and slid it across the mahogany table. "He is waiting." Homelander stared at the paper. The handwriting was jagged. Noir was in pain. Noir never showed pain. "He let you live," Homelander whispered. The realization hit him like a physical blow. "He didn't miss. He let you go. He sent you back like a dog with a message." Homelander's grip tightened on the glass. It shattered. Milk and shards of crystal exploded outward, splattering onto the expensive carpet. He thinks he's better than me, Homelander murmured, his eyes losing focus, drifting into a dissociative state of pure narcissism. He thinks I'm... what? A lab rat? He looked at Ashley, who was cowering near the door, clutching a tablet as if it were a shield. "Set up the stage," Homelander commanded. Ashley blinked, her heart rate spiking to 140. The stage for the shareholder meeting. "No," Homelander walked past her, his cape brushing her arm. "For the execution. Clear Vought Plaza. Get the cameras. Get the frantic fans. I want the world to watch me skin this rat alive." The sacred geometry of hype. Vought Plaza was a canyon of steel and concrete designed to amplify sound. By noon, it was packed with 10,000 people. They held signs: Homelander, God bless Vought, kill the alien. The air smelled of hot dogs, sweat, and manufactured hysteria. On the main stage, a massive screen broadcast the Vought News Network feed. Cameron Coleman was ranting about the interdimensional vermin that had crippled A-Train. The narrative was set. Shadow was a monster, a terrorist, a hater of freedom. Homelander descended from the sky. The crowd erupted. It was a wall of sound, a worshipful roar that usually fed him, filled the empty void in his chest. Today it felt thin. He landed on the stage, the perfect American god. He smiled, waved, and projected confidence, but his eyes were scanning. X-ray vision peeled back the layers of the crowd, searching for the dense bone structure, the chaos energy. "My fellow Americans," Homelander leaned into the microphone, his voice booming. "You're safe. I know you're scared. A beast has come to our city, a thing that hates our way of life." He paused for effect. A single tear, practiced and perfect, rolled down his cheek. "But I am here, and I say, come out." The descent. There was no sonic boom this time, no explosion. Shadow simply existed where he hadn't a moment before. He stood atop the giant Vought statue in the center of the plaza, a 50-foot bronze casting of Homelander holding up the globe. Shadow stood on the bronze globe, looking down at the real Homelander. The crowd gasped. 10,000 phones raised in unison to capture the image. Shadow crossed his arms. The wind whipped his quills back, but he remained immovable, anchored by his own gravitational manipulation. "Your need for validation is nauseating," Shadow said. He didn't use a microphone. He didn't need one. He projected his voice using a low-frequency chaos wave that resonated in the chest cavity of everyone in the plaza. It wasn't heard, it was felt. Homelander's smile twitched, a microspasm of the zygomaticus muscle. "You speak," Homelander laughed, lifting off the stage to hover at Shadow's eye level. "That's cute. Look at you. You're 3 feet tall. You're a plush toy with an attitude problem." "And you," Shadow retorted, his crimson eyes locking onto Homelander's blue ones, "are a product, a collection of insecurities wrapped in a flag." The crowd fell silent. Nobody spoke to Homelander like that. Not the president, not God. "I analyzed your vitals from the tower," Shadow continued, his tone clinical, dissecting. "Elevated cortisol, micro tremors in the hands. You are afraid, not of me, but of them." He gestured vaguely to the crowd below. "You are afraid they will see what you really are." The first exchange. Homelander snapped. The lasers fired. Twin beams of concentrated heat, capable of slicing through an aircraft carrier, erupted from his eyes. The air turned into plasma instantly. The crowd screamed and ducked. The beams struck Shadow, or rather they struck the space where Shadow had been. Teleportation. Shadow reappeared instantly behind Homelander, in the air. "Too slow," Shadow whispered. He didn't punch. He spun. A roundhouse kick, aided by the jet propulsion of his air shoes. Impact. Shadow's heel connected with the back of Homelander's neck. The sound was like a thunderclap. Homelander, the invincible, the untouchable, was swatted out of the sky. He crashed into the stage he had just left, obliterating the podium, the teleprompters, and cracking the concrete foundation. Dust billowed up in a massive cloud. Silence descended on the plaza. Absolute terrified silence. The dust cleared. Homelander lay in the crater. He wasn't dead. He wasn't even bleeding. But he was prone. He was face down in the rubble. Slowly, Homelander pushed himself up. His cape was torn. His hair was messed up. He looked up at Shadow, who was hovering effortlessly in the sky, arms still crossed, looking down with that same infuriating boredom. Homelander's eyes began to glow again, but this time, the red was brighter, unstable. The air around him began to vibrate. The mask was gone. The marketing was gone. "I'm going to rip you apart," Homelander screamed, his voice shredding his own vocal cords. "I'm going to eat your heart." Shadow uncrossed his arms. A green emerald. Not a chaos emerald, but a piece of kryptonite-like glowing ore he had synthesized from the Vought Lab's fuel cells, materialized in his hand. "Come then," Shadow taunted. "Show me the power of a false god." The collapse of physics. Homelander did not fly. He detonated. He launched himself from the crater with enough force to liquefy the concrete beneath him. He was a blur of blue and red, moving at Mach 4 within 10 feet. His fist, harder than diamond, aimed directly for Shadow's chest. Shadow did not teleport this time. He braced. He raised both forearms in a cross guard. The gold inhibitor rings flashed as they absorbed the kinetic impact. Boom! The shock wave was apocalyptic. All the glass in Vought Plaza, every window from the first floor to the 50th, shattered instantly. 1,000,000 shards rained down on the screaming crowd like glitter. Shadow was driven backward. He plowed through the bronze globe of the statue, shearing the metal like wet clay. He hit the side of Vought Tower, crashing through the steel, the drywall, the marble, and the support beams. He stopped in the middle of the 10th floor lobby, his hover shoes carving deep, molten trenches into the floor to arrest his momentum. Homelander was on him before the dust settled. "You think you're special?" Homelander screamed, tackling Shadow through a cubicle farm. Computers exploded into sparks and plastic shrapnel. "You're just an animal. I am the saver. I am the only one who matters." He mounted Shadow, pinning the hedgehog's small frame to the floor. Homelander rained blows down. Each punch was a wrecking ball. Crack, crack, crack. The floor beneath them buckled, collapsing into the 9th floor, then the 8th. They fell through the building, a comet of violence. Shadow took the hits. His head snapped back, but his expression remained a rictus of intense concentration. He was analyzing the rhythm. Left, right, left. Heavy pause. "You fight like a brawler," Shadow grunted, catching Homelander's fist in mid-swing. Homelander's eyes widened. He tried to pull his hand back. He couldn't. "No technique," Shadow hissed. "Just a tantrum." Shadow twisted his hips. He planted a boot on Homelander's stomach and threw him. It was a judo throw executed at supersonic speed. Homelander flew through the exterior wall, tumbling out into the open air of the city. The cheat code. Shadow leaped after him. He caught up to Homelander in midair, 50 stories above the street. Chaos! Shadow curled into a spinball. He became a buzzsaw of black and red energy. He struck Homelander's chest. The impact sounded like a bell tolling. Homelander coughed blood, a fine red mist that coated his chin. He had never coughed blood before. The sensation was alien, terrifying. Homelander flailed, grabbing Shadow by the leg. He spun, throwing the hedgehog toward the street below. "Die!" Homelander shrieked. His eyes lit up. He wasn't aiming at Shadow. He looked at the crowd, specifically a group of civilians huddled near the subway entrance. "If you won't die," Homelander's voice cracked, vibrating with psychotic logic, "then watch them burn." He fired. The twin lasers slashed down, not at Shadow, but at the structural supports of the subway overhang. The concrete began to slice. Tons of debris began to fall toward the hundreds of people trapped below. It was the ultimate checkmate. Save yourself or save the ants. The world stood still. Shadow saw the beam. He saw the falling concrete. He calculated the velocity of the debris, 9.8 meters per second squared, versus his own distance. He could not reach them physically in time. He reached into his quills. He pulled out the glowing, unstable green isotope he had stolen. It was pulsing rapidly, cracking under the strain of containing his energy. "Maria," he whispered, a memory of a promise flashing through his synapses. Shadow clenched the crystal. He thrust his hand upward. "Chaos control!" The color drained from the world. The sound of the screaming crowd cut out instantly. The roar of the wind vanished. The universe turned into a negative photograph, grayscale and silence. The falling concrete blocks froze in midair, suspended by the total arrest of time. The laser beams from Homelander's eyes were frozen pillars of red light, hanging in the sky like solid bars. Shadow dropped to the ground. He walked calmly through the frozen hellscape. He walked under the falling debris. He grabbed the civilians, a mother, a child, a businessman, and moved them. He didn't run. In this space between seconds, he had all the time in existence. He relocated 50 people, moving them from the impact zone to the safety of a nearby bank vault. He walked back to the street. He looked up at Homelander, who was frozen in a mask of pure, ugly hate. Shadow jumped. He skated up the frozen laser beam, using the solid light as a ramp. He stood directly in front of Homelander's face. The green crystal in his hand shattered, turning to dust. The time dilation was ending. Shadow wound up his fist. He channeled every ounce of the remaining energy into his knuckles. "Time resumes," Shadow said. "The king is dead." Snap. Color rushed back into the world. The debris crashed into the subway entrance, crushing nothing but empty pavement. Simultaneously, Shadow's fist connected with Homelander's jaw. It wasn't just a punch, it was a release of compressed temporal energy. Homelander's jaw didn't just break, it dislocated entirely. Several teeth were ejected from his mouth at bullet speeds. The force sent him spinning. He broke the sound barrier backward. He skipped off the roof of a taxi. He smashed through a billboard. He finally plowed into the asphalt of Fifth Avenue, digging a trench that stretched for 3 blocks. Shadow landed gracefully on a lamppost. He watched the dust settle. Homelander lay in the rubble. He tried to get up. He pushed himself onto his hands. He spat out a molar. He looked at his reflection in a puddle of oil. His face was swollen, purple, unrecognizable. The cameras were zooming in. The screens in Times Square broadcast the image. The invincibility was gone. The god was bleeding. He looked small. Shadow turned his back. "You are not worth killing," Shadow said, his voice carried by the wind. "You are already broken." Shadow tapped his shoes. The jets flared. He shot into the sky, vanishing into the clouds before the military jets could arrive. Homelander was left alone in the street, surrounded by silence, listening to the sound of his own poll numbers hitting 0. The vultures, the trench on Fifth Avenue, was smoking. The heat from Homelander's re-entry had melted the tarmac into a sticky, black sludge that clung to his cape. He lay on his back, staring up at the gray swirling sky. His jaw hung loosely, the mandible detached on the right side. Every breath was a gurgle of blood and saliva. His vision was swimming. He couldn't focus. His inner ear, usually a gyroscope of perfection, was spinning wild. He heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, not the panicked scurrying of civilians, but the rhythmic march of predators finding wounded prey. Shadow had left him. The hedgehog deemed him unworthy. But the men standing over him now had no such qualms. "Well, well," a voice rasped. It sounded like gravel in a blender. "Look at the state of you." Homelander tried to focus his eyes. 5 figures stood silhouetted against the broken streetlights. Billy Butcher stepped into the light. He wore a long trench coat that was soaked with rain. In his hand, he held a crowbar. It wasn't high-tech. It wasn't a soup-killing weapon. It was a rusted piece of iron he'd pulled from the wreckage. "You look a right mess, Sunshine." Butcher grinned. It was a terrifying expression. Pure, unadulterated hate. The kill box. "Clear the sector," Mother's Milk, MM, ordered, his voice tight. He held an assault rifle trained on Homelander's chest, though he knew bullets were useless. "We got maybe 2 minutes before Vought rapid response is here." "I am peeling the cameras," Frenchie said, tapping furiously on a wrist-mounted deck. "The feed is looped. The world thinks the signal cut out. We are dark." Kimiko stepped forward. She didn't speak. She looked at the fallen god and cracked her knuckles. Her eyes were wide, hungry. She remembered her brother. She remembered the terror. Huey stood behind Butcher. He looked pale. He was holding a remote detonator, the trigger for a C4 charge they had planted on the subway supports earlier, just in case. "Butcher, we have to be quick. If he wakes up..." "He ain't waking up," Butcher growled. He stepped onto Homelander's chest. Homelander wheezed. He felt the weight. He tried to lift his arm, but his muscles were spasming, flooded with lactic acid and shock. "You?" Homelander slurred, the word bubbling through the blood. "Me?" Butcher nodded. "And the lads. We saw the rat do the heavy lifting. Thought we'd come by and take out the trash." Butcher raised the crowbar high. He wasn't aiming for the head. He was aiming for the eye, the soft tissue, the only vulnerability. "This is for Becca," Butcher whispered. The expansion of threat. Butcher swung. P.O.P. The sound wasn't the crowbar hitting flesh. It was the sound of a wet balloon bursting. Butcher froze. The crowbar clattered to the ground. He wasn't holding it anymore because his right hand was numb. He looked to his left. A pigeon that had been pecking at the asphalt exploded, just turned into red mist. "Drop it, Billy." The voice was calm, professional, and terrifyingly familiar. Victoria Newman walked out from behind a burning police car. She wore a pristine pantsuit, holding an umbrella to shield herself from the rain. Her eyes were clouded over with a milky white film. "Congresswoman," Huey gasped. "Victoria," Butcher spat, clutching his numb hand. "You protecting this kit? After everything?" "I'm protecting the asset," Newman said coolly. She glanced at Homelander with a look of mild disgust, then back to the boys. "Stock prices are crashing, but if he dies today, the chain of command breaks. Vought collapses, and if Vought collapses, the billions of dollars in military contracts I just signed go up in smoke." "He's a monster!" Starlight Annie shouted, stepping out from the shadows where she had been guarding the rear. Her eyes glowed gold. "He tried to kill those people." "And the hedgehog saved them," Newman countered, "which makes the hedgehog the unknown variable. The United States government prefers the devil they know. The military complex." A low rumble shook the ground, louder than the thunder. From the end of the avenue, headlights pierced the gloom. Not police cruisers, armored personnel carriers, Humvees with mounted .50 cals, and behind them, the distinct insect-like silhouette of Vought peacekeeper drones. "We have a situation," MM said, tapping his earpiece. "Police scanner is going nuts. The president just declared a national state of emergency. They aren't arresting Homelander. They're establishing a perimeter." "To catch the hedgehog?" Huey asked. "To kill everything that isn't Vought," Frenchie corrected, "including us." Newman smiled tightly. "Go home, Billy. Live to fight another day. If you swing that bar, I pop Huey's head. Then the girls. Then yours." Butcher looked at Homelander. The soup was regaining consciousness, his eyes flickering with a faint red glow as the healing factor began to knit his jaw. Butcher looked at Newman. He looked at Huey. "Diabolical," Butcher muttered. He spat on Homelander's face. "We're leaving," Butcher barked. "Move!" The boys retreated into the subway tunnels, vanishing just as the first Humvee rolled over the debris. The asset recovery. Soldiers in black tactical gear swarmed the crater. They bore the insignia of the U.S. Army, but their equipment was Vought issue. A tall man in a suit stepped out of the lead vehicle, Stan Edgar. He didn't look at the soldiers. He walked straight to Homelander. He looked down at his premier product, lying in the mud, broken and humiliated. "Get him up," Edgar ordered. "Sir, he has multiple fractures," a medic stated. "I said get him up," Edgar said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Inject him with V24 if you have to. We have a narrative to spin." Two medics hauled Homelander to his feet. He screamed, a garbled, broken sound. Edgar leaned in close. "You embarrassed me, John," Edgar whispered. "You let a rodent strip you of your dignity. Now you work for me. Truly. We are going to tell the world that you were weakened by an alien virus, that you fought bravely against an interdimensional invader." Edgar signaled to the drone operators. "Mobilize the reserves," Edgar commanded. "Wake up Tech Knight, get Cindy out of the box, and authorize the release of the Compound V aerosol in the lower boroughs." "Sir?" The general next to him hesitated. "The aerosol? That will create thousands of uncontrolled soups. Chaos." "Exactly." Edgar adjusted his glasses. "The hedgehog wants to be a hero? Let's see how he handles a city of monsters. We are going to drown him in blood." The Watcher. High above, perched on the lightning rod of the Empire State Building, Shadow watched. He saw the boys retreat. He saw the military cordon off the fallen false god. He heard the order to release the chemical agent. He clenched his fist. The rain ran down his face. "They protect the cancer," Shadow observed. "They would rather burn their own city than admit they are wrong." He sensed the new energy signatures rising, hundreds of them. The aerosol was already deploying in the Bronx, mutating civilians, creating mindless, violent super beings. Shadow's inhibitor rings gleamed. "Fine," Shadow said to the wind. "If you want a war, I will give you an apocalypse." Oh, execute Homelander, but are stopped by Victoria Newman in the U.S. military, leading Stan Edgar to initiate a catastrophic scorched earth protocol. The biological riot. The Bronx was burning. It wasn't a clean fire. It was a chemical blaze fueled by the volatility of the aerosol cloud that hung low over the tenements. The gas, a crude, weaponized derivative of Compound V, didn't grant heroes their powers. It violently rewrote the genetic code of anyone who breathed it. Shadow skated down the Grand Concourse. The street was a slaughterhouse. A bus driver, now swollen to 8 feet of tumored muscle, was tearing his own vehicle apart with bare hands. A teenager screamed as her skin turned into diamond shards. the transformation so rapid it shattered her own clothes. Shadow did not engage them all. He wove through the carnage, a black streak in the orange fog. Target identification, civilian combatants. Mental faculties, 0. Threat, high. A woman lunged at him, her jaw unhinged, revealing rows of serrated shark teeth. She screeched, a sound that shattered glass. Shadow didn't stop. He spun, his leg extending. He didn't kick her. He used the exhaust of his hover shoes to blast her backward with a wave of thermal energy. She hit a lamppost, stunned but alive. They are victims, Shadow reminded himself, his voice tight. Do not kill the sick. But the sick were trying to kill him. The armored detective. Target acquired. The voice was mechanical, amplified by a loudspeaker. Shadow skidded to a halt. He looked up. Hovering 20 feet above him was a suit of high-tech power armor. Sleek, black, and gunmetal gray. The visor glowed a menacing green. Tech Knight. Inside the suit, Robert Vernon's eyes darted across his HUD. Entity analysis, biological, density, 300% human norm, energy, output off the charts. You're the little freak causing all this property damage, Tech Knight announced. His suit's shoulder-mounted cannons track Shadow's movements with millimeter precision. Vought has authorized lethal force, and honestly, I've been itching to test the Mark IV railguns. Shadow dusted off his shoulder. A machine? How uninspired. Tech Knight fired. The railguns didn't fire bullets. They fired tungsten flechettes at Mach 7. Shadow didn't dodge. He moved forward. He zigzagged, the movement pattern chaotic and unpredictable. The flechettes tore up the asphalt where he had been a microsecond before. Shadow closed the distance. He leaped, propelling himself off the hood of a crushed taxi. He landed on Tech Knight's chest plate. Get off! Tech Knight panicked, activating the suit's electrified hull. A surge of 50,000 volts coursed through the armor. Shadow absorbed it. He grabbed the suit's helmet with both hands. Your armor is impressive, Shadow noted, his face inches from the visor. But there is a man inside, and men need to breathe. Shadow crushed the air intake valves on the neck of the suit. Metal crumpled like paper. The suit's alarm screamed, "Oxygen critical!" Tech Knight thrashed, firing his repulsors blindly. Shadow backflipped off the suit, landing gracefully on a gargoyle 3 stories up. Tech Knight crashed into the street, gasping, tearing at his own helmet to get it off before he suffocated. Amateur, Shadow scoffed. The telekinetic pressure. Suddenly, the gargoyle under Shadow's feet exploded. Not from a bomb, it simply turned into powder. Shadow fell. He righted himself in midair, but an invisible hand grabbed him. It wasn't physical, it was force. Pure, crushing telekinetic pressure. He slammed into the side of a brick building. He tried to move, but his limbs were pinned by the mind of another. Standing in the middle of the street, barefoot and wearing a hospital gown, was a woman. Her head was shaved. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and terrifyingly vacant. Cindy. She didn't speak. She just tilted her head, and Shadow was dragged through the brick wall, tumbling into the apartment building. Shadow rolled, knocking over a sofa. He stood up, shaking the dust from his quills. Psychokinesis, Shadow analyzed. He felt the pressure building again, a headache trying to split his skull. Silver has better range. Cindy flicked her wrist. The ceiling collapsed. 10 tons of concrete and support beams crashed down on top of Shadow. Outside, Tech Knight, who had finally ripped his helmet off, watched the building implode. Jesus, he wheezed. Cindy doesn't play. The chaos blast. The rubble pile sat still for 3 seconds. Then a red light began to bleed through the cracks in the concrete. A low hum, like a turbine spinning up, vibrated the teeth of everyone within 3 blocks. Chaos! Blast! An omnidirectional explosion of red energy erupted from the center of the debris. The concrete didn't just fly apart, it vaporized. The blast wave cleared a sphere of perfect emptiness, 200 feet in diameter. Shadow floated in the center of the crater. His inhibitor rings were glowing white-hot. His fur was bristling with static. Cindy stumbled back, her nose bleeding. Her telekinetic shield had shattered under the sheer magnitude of the energy release. She looked at Shadow, and for the first time, the blank look was replaced by fear. Shadow descended slowly. The asphalt melted beneath his feet just from his proximity. "You push matter," Shadow said, his voice echoing with a demonic distortion. "I command chaos. We are not the same." The boys underground. 70 feet below the battle, in the frantic darkness of the subway maintenance tunnels, the boys were running. The tunnels were not empty. The aerosol had seeped down through the ventilation shafts. "Left! Go left!" Butcher screamed, firing his M4 carbine behind him. A swarm of mutated rats, each the size of a German shepherd, with glowing blue eyes, was chasing them. They were fast, rabid, and hungry. Kimiko was the rear guard. She slashed, her claws tearing through the mutated fur and flesh. She was covered in gore, grinning wildly, but even she was getting overwhelmed. There were too many. "We're boxed in!" Huey yelled, pointing his flashlight ahead. The tunnel had collapsed. A dead end. The rats screeched, closing the distance. A wave of fur and teeth. "Annie!" Butcher roared. Starlight stepped forward. She closed her eyes. She drew power from the overhead emergency lights, blowing the bulbs out one by one. Her hands glowed with blinding luminescence. "Eat this, you little socks!" She grit her teeth. She unleashed a blast of photokinetic energy. It blinded the rats, searing their retinas. The front row of the swarm cooked instantly, the smell of burning hair filling the tunnel. But more were coming. Suddenly, the ceiling above them shook. Dust rained down. A voice, Shadow's voice, echoed through the rock and steel, carried by the sheer volume of the battle above. "If you want a war, I will give you an apocalypse." Frenchie paused, looking up at the vibrating ceiling. "The hedgehog, he is fighting the war for us. Or he's bringing the roof down on our heads," Butcher reloaded his clip. "Either way, we need a way out. Frenchie, the C4. "But the structural integrity," Frenchie argued. "Blow it," Butcher ordered. "We go up, out of the pan, into the fire. Better to deal with the soups than the rats." The ultimatum. Back on the surface, Shadow stood over the unconscious form of Cindy. He had knocked her out with a single, precise chop to the carotid artery after breaking her mental hold. The street was quiet. The lesser mutants had fled from the chaos blast. Tech Knight was gone, retreated to repair his suit. Shadow looked at the Vought tower in the distance, the source of the aerosol. He reached into his quills and pulled out a communicator, a piece of tech he had salvaged from Tech Knight's discarded helmet. He crushed the casing to bypass the encryption and broadcast on an open frequency. "Edgar," Shadow spoke. In the penthouse of Vought Tower, Stan Edgar sat by the fireplace, sipping a brandy. He pressed a button on his desk. "I am listening." "You treat this city like a petri dish," Shadow said. "You release monsters to kill a monster." "I release antibodies to kill a virus," Edgar corrected, his voice smooth as silk. "You are the pathogen, Mr. Hedgehog." "Then let us test your immunity," Shadow replied. Shadow crouched. The energy gathered around him again, But this time, it was different. He wasn't aiming at a person. He was aiming at the infrastructure. "I am coming to the tower," Shadow promised, "and I am not taking the elevator." He launched. He didn't fly around the buildings. He flew through them. He became a missile, shattering glass and steel, drawing a straight line of destruction directly toward the Vought headquarters. The kinetic spike. Shadow did not slow down. He hit the south face of Vought Tower at Mach 1.5. He didn't aim for a window. He aimed for the structural pillars between the 40th and 50th floors. He curled into a spin ball, his biofield hardened to a diamond-like lattice. Impact. The sound was a dull, wet thud that vibrated through the entire borough. The glass facade of the tower didn't just break, it liquefied from the friction heat. Shadow bored into the building like a bullet into ballistic gel. He tore through the marketing department. Desks, awards, and motivational posters were reduced to confetti in his wake. He punched through the floor, then the ceiling, zigzagging upward in a chaotic ascent. He was a buzzsaw inside the elevator shaft. He severed the cables. The heavy cars plummeted 70 stories, crashing into the basement with the force of a bomb. Shadow planted his feet on the vertical wall of the shaft. He looked up. 80 floors to go. "Too slow," he muttered. He flared his jets. He became a golden comet, rising through the heart of the enemy stronghold. The resurface. Outside, at the base of the tower, the pavement heaved. Boom! A plume of fire and smoke erupted from a subway grate. A chunk of asphalt the size of a minivan flipped into the air. The boys climbed out of the hole, coughing and covered in sewer grime. "Fresh air," Huey gagged, wiping slime from his face. "Oh God, it smells like burning hair." "Look," Kimiko pointed. They looked up. Vought Tower was bleeding smoke from a dozen wounds. Flashes of red and gold light strobed from the windows as Shadow fought his way up. Debris, office chairs, computers, bodies of Vought security rained down onto the plaza. "He's actually doing it," Mother's Milk shouted over the roar of falling glass. "He's gutting the place." Butcher racked the slide of his rifle. He looked at the chaos with a grim satisfaction. "Right then," Butcher spat, "the hedgehog is the distraction. We're the scalpel. While everyone is looking at the fireworks, we go for the servers. We get the dirt on Edgar, the V formulas, everything. We burn them down legally and physically." "The servers are on floor 82, Frenchie calculated, just below the penthouse." "Perfect," Butcher grinned. "Starlight, can you fly us up?" Starlight looked at the destruction. She looked at her hands. "I can float. I can't carry 4 people up a war zone." "Then we climb," Butcher kicked open the emergency stairwell door. "Move!" The 99th floor. Shadow burst through the floor of the 99th floor conference room. He landed in a crouch, steam rising from his fur. The room was empty of executives. The table was gone. In its place stood the deep and black Noir. Noir was bandaged, moving stiffly. The Deep was holding a trident, looking terrified but cornered. He's here," the Deep squeaked. "Bro, he's so small. Why is he so scary?" Shadow stood up. He didn't even look at the Deep. He looked at Noir. "You again?" Shadow asked. "I admired your persistence. Now I pity your stupidity." Noir drew his katana. The blade was new, vibrating with a high-frequency edge. "Attacking me is suicide," Shadow warned. Suddenly, the air pressure in the room spiked. A blur of motion. Shadow didn't see it. He felt it. He raised his arm to block. Crack. Shadow was launched across the room. He smashed through the wall, tumbling into the executive hallway. He skid to a halt, digging his claws into the carpet. He looked up. Standing in the hole in the wall was not Noir. It was not the Deep. It was Queen Maeve. She wore her armor, but her eyes were dull, unfocused. A metal collar was clamped around her neck, a neural inhibitor/stimulator, Vought tech, mind control. "I don't want to do this," Maeve said, her voice monotone, fighting the collar. Her muscles were tense, fighting her own nervous system. "Run!" Shadow stood up. He wiped a drop of blue blood from his lip. "They enslave their own champions," Shadow said, his anger cold and sharp. "This world has no honor." Maeve charged. She was strong, stronger than the others. She hit Shadow with the force of a freight train. Shadow caught her fists. The floor beneath him buckled. "I am sorry," Shadow whispered to her. He swept her leg. As she fell, he placed a hand on the neural collar. Chaos. He surged a precise low-voltage pulse of chaos energy directly into the circuitry. Zap. The collar shorted out. Smoke hissed from the neck piece. Maeve gasped, her eyes clearing. She fell to her knees, clutching her throat, coughing. The mental fog lifted. "You..." Maeve looked up at the hedgehog. "Rest," Shadow commanded. "I have a CEO to visit." The penthouse. Shadow walked to the double doors of the penthouse. He didn't open them. He blasted them off their hinges with a wave of his hand. Stan Edgar stood by the floor-to-ceiling window. The city below was burning. The sky was gray. He turned to face Shadow. He didn't look afraid. He looked disappointed. "So much noise," Edgar said. "For what? To prove you exist?" Shadow walked into the room. He stopped 10 feet from the desk. "To prove that you are not gods," Shadow said. "You are just men with chemistry sets." "And you," Edgar smiled slightly, "you are a biology experiment gone right. A fascinating specimen. Do you know why I haven't evacuated, Mr. Shadow?" Shadow narrowed his eyes. "Arrogance." "Preparation," Edgar corrected. Edgar pressed a button on a small remote in his hand. The floor behind Shadow opened. A containment pod rose from the subfloor. It hissed as the seals broke. Liquid nitrogen poured out, fogging the room. Shadow turned. A figure stepped out of the mist. He wore a green suit, a shield on his arm, a helmet that obscured his face. Soldier Boy. But he wasn't the Soldier Boy of the past. His chest was glowing. A nuclear reactor implanted directly into his sternum, pulsing with a volatile, radioactive red light. Vought had upgraded him, turned him into a living nuke. "Ben," Edgar said calmly, "kill the rat." Soldier Boy cracked his neck. He looked at Shadow. He looked confused, then angry. "A fucking cartoon?" Soldier Boy grunted. His voice sounded like gravel. "I woke up for this?" Shadow sensed the energy. Radiation levels. Critical. Threat assessment. Extreme. "Another relic," Shadow scoffed, though he shifted his stance, widening his base. "Let's see if you break as easily as the others." Soldier Boy didn't charge. He simply began to glow brighter. The radiation in the room spiked. The furniture began to smolder. "I don't break, buddy," Soldier Boy said, charging his chest beam. "I explode." The nuclear winter. The air in the penthouse ceased to be air. It became a soup of ionizing radiation. The Geiger counters in the Vought lab downstairs would have been screaming had they not already melted. Soldier Boy let out a roar, a sound of pure masculine rage that had been bottled up since 1984. The reactor in his chest flared white hot. BZZEEEEEWWWW. The beam didn't travel, it simply connected. A column of radioactive plasma erupted from his chest, wide enough to engulf a tank. Shadow did not move. He did not dodge. He thrust his palms forward. Chaos control. He didn't freeze time. He warped space. He created a localized singularity, a dimensional pocket, directly in front of his hands. The nuclear beam hit the singularity. It didn't stop. It was swallowed. The energy spiraled into the void, compressed by infinite gravity. Shadow gritted his teeth, his arms shaking violently. The heat was unbearable. His gloves began to smoke. The gold rings on his wrists rattled against his bones. "You're strong," Shadow admitted, sweat evaporating instantly from his brow. "But you lack focus." Shadow twisted his wrists. He closed the singularity. Then he opened the exit vector, behind Soldier Boy. The beam that Soldier Boy had fired reappeared instantly behind him, looping through the portal. It slammed into Soldier Boy's back. Boom! Soldier Boy was blasted forward by his own energy. He flew past Shadow, crashing through Stan Edgar's antique mahogany desk and smashing into the fireplace. The impact was seismic. The data heist. Floor 82, the server room. The temperature had spiked to 120 degrees. The plastic casings on the server racks were warping. "We're losing the connection," Frenchie screamed, typing on a keyboard that was hot to the touch. "The heat from upstairs. It is frying the hard drives." "Don't give me excuses. Give me the V24 formula," Butcher barked, watching the ceiling. Dust was pouring down. He could hear the battle above. It sounded like gods bowling with planets. 98%. Huey watched the progress bar. "Come on, come on." Crash. A massive chunk of the ceiling gave way. A vending machine from the floor above crashed down, flattening a row of servers. "Huey!" Starlight threw a shield up, deflecting a shower of concrete. "Got it!" Huey yanked the external drive. "I have it. The emails, the formula, the dirty laundry on Edgar. It's all here." "Then we leg it." Butcher kicked the door open. "To the window. Annie, you're our elevator." The Titans fall. Back in the penthouse, the smoke cleared. Soldier Boy stood up. His suit was scorched. The backplate melted away to reveal raw, red skin that was already healing. He looked pissed. "Cheap trick," Soldier Boy spat, wiping ash from his mouth. "You fight like a commie." He grabbed his shield. It wasn't just metal. It was a heavy tungsten alloy. He threw it. It moved at Mach 1. Shadow leaned back. The shield grazed his nose, shearing off a quill. It embedded itself in the wall behind him, burying deep into the steel girder. Shadow lunged. He closed the gap in a blur. He delivered a flurry of blows to Soldier Boy's midsection. Bam, 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 bam. Each hit was heavy enough to dent a tank, but Soldier Boy was dense. It was like punching a mountain. Soldier Boy grabbed Shadow's arm. His grip was crushing. "Gotcha, you little prickly fuck." Soldier Boy grinned. He headbutted Shadow. Crack. Shadow saw stars. His vision blurred. The sheer brute force of the super soldier was staggering. Soldier Boy didn't use technique. He used raw, unstoppable mass. Soldier Boy lifted Shadow and slammed him into the floor. Then again. Then again. "I stormed Normandy." Slam. "I beat the Russians." Slam. "I'm not losing to a rodent." Shadow coughed. He felt a rib crack. His energy reserves were low. The dirty fuel from the power grid was burning out. He needed an edge. He looked past Soldier Boy. Queen Maeve was standing up. She looked at Shadow, pinned under the boot of the glowing soldier. She looked at Stan Edgar, who was calmly watching from the corner, adjusting his cufflinks. Maeve saw the shield stuck in the wall. She didn't run. She didn't flee. She grabbed the shield. With a roar of effort, she ripped it from the steel girder. "Ben!" Maeve screamed. Soldier Boy turned. Clang! Maeve brought the heavy shield down on Soldier Boy's head with every ounce of her strength. The impact rang like a church bell. Soldier Boy stumbled, his grip on Shadow loosening. Maeve? Soldier Boy blinked, dazed. You traitorous bitch. The Chaos Blade. Shadow rolled free. He didn't waste the opening. He reached up. The air crackled. He wasn't forming a spear this time. He was concentrating the energy into a flat cutting edge. Chaos! Slicer! He waved his hand in a horizontal arc. A crescent moon of pure energy slashed across the room. It hit Soldier Boy's chest. It didn't cut the skin. Soldier Boy was too durable. But it cut the reactor. The housing of the nuclear implant cracked. Oh, Soldier Boy looked down. The red glow turned erratic, pulsing violet, then blinding white. It's going critical! Edgar's calm finally broke. He moved toward his private panic room. Shadow looked at Maeve. Jump! What? Maeve braced herself. Jump! Shadow grabbed Maeve by the waist. He flared his jets to maximum output. They blasted out of the hole in the wall, shooting into the open sky just as Soldier Boy detonated. The silent explosion. It wasn't a fire explosion, it was a radiation burst. A sphere of blinding light expanded from the penthouse. It vaporized the top 3 floors of Vought Tower instantly. The glass turned to mist. The steel skeleton glowed white, then dripped like wax. The shock wave hit the boys, who were floating down carefully with Starlight's help, 10 stories below. Brace! Starlight screamed, wrapping them in a bubble of light. The shock wave batted them out of the air like flies. They tumbled, crashing onto the roof of a nearby parking garage. Shadow and Maeve were higher, riding the thermal updraft. They landed on the spire of the Chrysler building. Maeve fell to her knees, gasping for air. She watched Vought Tower. The top was gone. Smoke billowed up in a mushroom cloud. Maeve panted. Is he dead? Shadow stood on the edge, his arms crossed, staring at the inferno. His sensors picked up a faint, rhythmic thumping from the wreckage. A heartbeat. No, Shadow said grimly. Cockroaches survive nukes. The fallout. Stan Edgar had survived. The panic room was lined with lead and zinc. He stepped out into the ruins of his office. The sky was open above him. Ash fell like snow. He dusted off his suit jacket. He picked up his phone. The screen was cracked, but it worked. Mr. President, Edgar said, his voice steady, we have a situation. The asset has gone rogue. The alien is hostile. We need to initiate the Scorched Earth Protocol. He paused, listening to the terrified voice on the other end. Yes, Edgar said. Authorize the 7, all of them. The reserves, the retirees, and tell Homelander. Tell him he can have the kill. The Alliance. On the roof of the parking garage, Butcher groaned, popping his shoulder back into its socket. Huey was clutching the hard drive like a baby. I got it. It's safe. Shadow dropped from the sky, landing silently among them. Maeve dropped next to him, looking battered but alive. Butcher looked at the hedgehog. He looked at Maeve. He looked at his team. Well, Butcher spat blood onto the concrete. We got the files, we got the queen, and we got the hedgehog. He extended a hand toward Shadow. Name's Billy, Butcher said. You want to burn Vought down? We've got the matches. Shadow looked at the hand. He didn't shake it. He nodded once. Shadow, the hedgehog replied, and we are going to need a bigger fire. The exfiltration. The getaway vehicle was a stolen Wonder Bread delivery truck. It rattled down the back roads of New Jersey. the suspension groaning under the weight of Queen Maeve's armor and Shadow's density. Inside the cargo hold, the mood was funeral somber. Butcher sat on a crate of sourdough, cleaning his rifle. He watched Shadow. The hedgehog was sitting in the corner, eyes closed, in a meditative trance. A faint golden aura pulsed around him, syncing with the rhythm of the truck's engine. "You're bleeding, mate," Butcher noted, pointing to the matted fur on Shadow's chest, where Soldier Boy had cracked a rib. Shadow opened one eye. "It will knit. My physiology is superior." "Superior," Maeve scoffed from the floor. She was holding a bag of frozen peas to her neck, where the inhibitor collar had been. "You took a nuke to the face, and you're complaining about a rib? You're as arrogant as Homelander." "No," Shadow corrected, his voice low. "Homelander thinks he is a god because he is strong. I am strong because I was created to kill gods. There is a difference." The truck lurched. Frenchie, driving like a maniac, shouted from the front, "We are arriving. The colonel is waiting." The black site. The safe house was a decommissioned CIA listening post in the Catskills. Radar dishes rusted in the tree line. Grace Mallory stood on the porch, a Glock tucked into her waistband. She watched the motley crew spill out of the bread truck. She saw Butcher. She saw the terrified Huey. She saw the traitor Queen Maeve. And she saw the 3-foot alien. Mallory didn't blink. She lit a cigarette. "Butcher," she exhaled smoke. "You bring the circus to my lawn." "Brought a souvenir, Colonel," Butcher grinned. "Meet Shadow. He's the one who turned Vought Tower into a chimney." Shadow stepped forward. He scanned Mallory. Subject, human female. Age, geriatric. Pulse, steady. Threat, political, not physical. "We require shelter," Shadow stated, "and a laboratory." Mallory looked at the hedgehog. "I saw the news. You saved those people in the plaza. The president has a drone strike package with your name on it hovering over the tri-state area." "Let them hover," Shadow said. "I have work to do." The alchemy of chaos. The basement of the listening post was converted into a makeshift lab. Frenchie was vibrating with nervous energy. He had the V24 formula displayed on 3 monitors. The black box hard drive was decrypted. "It is. C'est magnifique," Frenchie whispered, tracing the chemical bonds on the screen. "And terrifying. Compound 5, it is not just a mutagen. It is a high-energy, dense fluid. It rewrites the ATP in the cells to function like nuclear reactors." Shadow stood on a stool looking at the data. "It is crude," Shadow critiqued. "It forces the body to draw energy from an external dimension, but it provides no filter. That is why it causes brain damage. That is why your soups are insane. Their minds cannot handle the frequency." Shadow rolled up his glove. He produced a syringe. "Take my blood," Shadow ordered. Frenchie froze. "Quoi?" "My blood contains the genetic sequence of the ultimate life form. It is designed to channel chaos energy, infinite power, without degradation." Shadow pointed to the V24 formula. "Mix the V24 with my blood plasma. Isolate the isotope. If my calculations are correct, we create a filter," Frenchie realized, his eyes widening. "A stable version of V, temporary but safe and potent." "A chaos drive," Shadow corrected. "Liquid power. I am running on fumes. If I am to finish this war, I need fuel." The war room. While the scientists worked, Butcher and Maeve stood over a tactical map of New York. "Edgar isn't going to just sit there," Maeve said, tracing the perimeter of the city. "He's activated the G-men." "The college kids?" Huey asked. "From Godolkin, you?" "They aren't kids anymore," Maeve shook her head. They're a paramilitary death squad, hundreds of them. And he's got Tech Knights reserves. And he's calling in the international assets. International? MM asked. The soup's Vought lent to foreign dictators, Maeve explained. Loves sausage from Russia, the Nubian prince from Africa. They're all flying in. New York is going to be the staging ground for World War III. Butcher looked at the map. He saw the red dots converging on the city. Let 'em come, Butcher growled. We don't need to beat an army. We just need to cut the head off the snake. Homelander, MM said. No, Shadow's voice cut in from the doorway. He walked in, holding a vial of glowing, iridescent red liquid, the new serum. Homelander is a symptom. Stan Edgar is the disease. The broken god. Inside the ruins of Vought Tower, on the 50th floor, which was now the top floor, Homelander sat on a folding chair. A medical drone was stitching his cheek back together. The laser surgery left a thin, pink scar. He didn't scream. He didn't speak. He just stared at the wall. Stan Edgar walked in. He wore a hazmat suit to protect against the lingering radiation from Soldier Boy's blast. The stock is at 0, John, Edgar said, his voice tinny through the mask. The company is insolvent. Congress is drafting a bill to seize our assets. Homelander didn't blink. But, Edgar continued, walking to the edge of the shattered floor, looking out at the smoke-choked city, we have one asset left, fear. Edgar turned to Homelander. I am removing the leash, John. No more polling. No more demographic targets. No more saving the cat. Homelander looked up. His eyes were red, bloodshot, and weary. Kill the hedgehog, Edgar commanded. Kill the boys. Kill the city if you have to. Just remind them why they used to worship you. Homelander stood up. The medical drone was knocked aside, crashing to the floor. A smile crept across his scarred face. It wasn't the movie star smile. It was the smile of a rabid dog realizing the cage door was open. And Soldier Boy? Homelander rasped. We dug him out. Edgar gestured to a containment unit being loaded onto a helicopter nearby. He is unconscious, but we are waking him up. We are going to drop him on the Catskills. Homelander laughed, a dry hacking sound. Scorched earth. The hunt begins. At the safe house, the perimeter alarm screamed. Mallory kicked open the front door, rifle raised. We're blown! Incoming! Shadow ran to the porch. He looked up. The sky was filled with contrails, 3 Vought transport helicopters, and flanking them, flying under their own power, the 7, or what was left of them. The Deep, a newly repaired A train, doped up on V, and leading the formation, a squadron of Godolkin University soup terrorists in tactical gear. They tracked the truck, Butcher cursed. We got a siege. Shadow looked at the vial in his hand, the Chaos Drive serum. He looked at the boys. They were loading their weapons, terrified but ready to die. Frenchie, Shadow said, is the synthesis stable? Theoretically, Frenchie yelled, grabbing an RPG. Shadow uncorked the vial. Bottoms up, Shadow whispered. He drank it. Krakum. The shockwave originated from Shadow's stomach. His fur turned from black to a shimmering, radiant gold. His eyes shifted from crimson to a blinding ruby light. He floated off the porch, the wood planks shattering under the gravitational pressure of his ascension. He wasn't Super Shadow. He lacked the emeralds for that perfect form, but he was supercharged. He was a reactor going critical. He flew up to meet the helicopters. Get off my lawn, Shadow roared. He snapped his fingers. Chaos! Spear! A barrage of 50 energy bolts materialized in the air behind him, hanging like the swords of Damocles. He pointed forward. The sky turned into a fireworks display of blood and metal. The golden rain. The sky above the Catskills became a grid of destruction. Shadow's chaos spears did not travel like bullets. They traveled like thoughts, instantaneous, inescapable. 50 lances of hard light energy pierced the rotors, engines, and cockpits of the Vought armada. Impact. The lead helicopter, carrying a squad of G-men, sheared in half. The fuel tank ignited, creating a fireball that illuminated the tree line. The second chopper spun out of control, its tail rotor disintegrated, crashing into the lake with a massive geyser of water and steam. The deep was in the third bird. He didn't wait for impact. He unbuckled and dove out the open door, plummeting 200 feet into the murky lake water. He survived because fleeing was his only true superpower. Shadow hovered amidst the falling wreckage. The V-24 variant coursing through his veins felt like liquid fire. His senses were dialed to 11. He could see the individual rivets on the falling debris. He could hear the panicked heartbeats of the pilots before they died. Inefficient, Shadow judged. He turned his gaze to the ground. The G-men who had fast roped down before the crash were advancing on the cabin. The kill box. "Contact front!" Mallory screamed, firing her rifle from the porch. The G-men were young, trained in the Godolkin brutalist style, flashy, destructive, and lacking tactical cohesion. A soup with skin made of obsidian charged the stairs. Kimiko met him. She didn't use weapons. She used leverage. She ducked his haymaker, climbed his back like a spider, and drove her thumbs into his eyes. The obsidian cracked. He screamed. Butcher stood in the open doorway, firing short, controlled bursts. "Huey, keep the files safe. MM, flank left." A bolt of lightning struck the porch railing, blowing it to splinters. A G-man floater, Shockwave, was hovering near the tree line. "I got him!" Starlight stepped out. Her eyes glowed. She absorbed the ambient electricity from the blown transformers on the perimeter fence. She fired a beam of pure blinding white light. Shockwave was blasted out of the sky, his nervous system overloaded. "Nice shot, love," Butcher yelled. Then the blur returned. The relapse run. A-Train was vibrating. He had injected 3 vials of Compound V on the flight over. His heart was beating so fast it sounded like a drum roll. His broken leg from the previous fight had been fused with titanium rods, and he couldn't feel the pain anymore. He couldn't feel anything but the need. He saw Shadow hovering 10 feet off the ground. "You ruined me," A-Train shrieked. He launched, Mach 4, faster than before. He was tearing the grass up by the roots just by running over it. He aimed a vibrato punch at Shadow's kidneys, intending to liquefy them. Shadow didn't turn around. He simply extended his hand backward. Clench. Shadow caught A-Train's face. The sudden stop at Mach 4 should have snapped A-Train's neck. It would have, if Shadow hadn't absorbed the kinetic energy instantly into his golden aura. A-Train's legs kept running, churning the air, but his head was held immovable in Shadow's grip. Shadow turned slowly. His ruby eyes burned with the intensity of a dying star. "I broke you once," Shadow said, his voice distorted by the energy overflow. "Now I will discard you." Shadow flared his chaos energy. He didn't grind him this time. He threw him. He tossed A-Train straight up. Chaos. Control. Shadow teleported. He appeared above the ascending speedster. He axe-kicked A-Train back down to Earth. Boom! A-Train hit the ground so hard he created a crater 10 feet deep. The impact shattered the titanium rods in his legs. He lay there twitching, his speedster suit fused to his skin by the friction heat. The radioactive drop? The victory was short-lived. A heavy cargo plane screamed overhead at 30,000 feet. The rear bay door opened. No parachute, just a heavy metallic object falling. "Incoming heavy!" MM shouted, tackling Huey behind the overturned bread truck. The object whistled as it fell. It slammed into the clearing between the house and the lake. The shock wave flattened the trees for 100 yards. The windows of the safe house blew inward. Steam rose from the impact crater. A figure climbed out. Soldier Boy. But he looked wrong. His skin was glowing a translucent, angry cherry red. Veins of black necrosis spiderwebbed across his neck. The nuclear reactor in his chest was cracked, leaking unstable radiation. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was a walking meltdown. "Everything," Soldier Boy slurred, his voice sounding like grinding gears. "Burns." He didn't aim. He just let it go. Flash. A wave of ionizing radiation swept across the battlefield. The remaining G-men caught in the open didn't even scream. They just dissolved. Ash on the wind. Shadow dropped in front of the safe house. He flared his golden aura, creating a barrier. The radiation washed over him, sizzling against the Chaos shield. "He is critical," Shadow gritted his teeth, feeling the strain. "He is going to vaporize the mountain." Queen Maeve jumped over the porch railing, landing beside Shadow. Her armor was already heating up. "Can you teleport him?" Maeve yelled over the roar of the energy storm. "Space is distorted by the radiation," Shadow shouted back. "I need to weaken him first." The arrival of the god. The sky darkened, not from clouds, but from a silhouette descending from the stratosphere. The sonic boom arrived a second later, shattering the eardrums of everyone not enhanced. Homelander landed on the roof of the safe house. He looked monstrous. Half his face was a ruin of scar tissue and stitching, where Shadow had broken his jaw. He wasn't wearing his gloves. His hands were covered in dried blood. He didn't look at the boys. He didn't look at Soldier Boy. He looked down at Shadow. "Found you," Homelander whispered. He didn't laser. He dove. Homelander tackled Shadow. The momentum carried them both away from the house, slamming into the earth, dragging a trench through the mud and rock. They rolled, exchanging blows that cracked the bedrock. Homelander was stronger than before, hysterical strength born of madness. He punched Shadow in the face, splitting the hedgehog's lip. Shadow retaliated with a spin dash, grinding his quills into Homelander's chest, shredding the American flag suit. They separated, standing 20 feet apart in the burning clearing. To the left, Soldier Boy was charging another blast, screaming incoherently. To the right, the boys were pinned down, firing useless bullets at the advancing radiation. It was a three-way standoff. The monster, Soldier Boy, the maniac, Homelander, and the ultimate life form, Shadow. The unholy trinity. Shadow wiped the blood from his mouth. The V-24 was peaking. His inhibitor rings were vibrating, threatening to shatter. "Butcher!" Shadow projected his voice to the house. "Get them out! I cannot protect you and fight them." "We ain't leaving you, mate!" Butcher yelled back, though he was coughing up blood from the radiation sickness starting to set in. "Go!" Shadow roared. He clapped his hands together. "Chaos! Blast!" A dome of red light expanded, pushing Homelander and Soldier Boy back. It bought them 10 seconds. Homelander stood up, laughing. He looked at Soldier Boy. "Hey, Dad," Homelander sneered, his broken jaw clicking. "You look like Sirach." Soldier Boy looked at Homelander. Recognition flickered in his glowing eyes. Disappointment. Soldier Boy fired his chest beam at Homelander. Homelander fired his eye lasers at Soldier Boy. The two beams met in the middle, a deadlock of nuclear fire and heat vision. Shadow stood between them. He saw the energy building. The point where the beams crossed was creating a singularity, "This world," Shadow muttered, crouching low, "is too loud." He leaped. He didn't attack one. He attacked the intersection. Shadow dove into the colliding beams. He absorbed the energy of both. The pain was absolute. It felt like his molecular structure was being torn apart, but he held it. "I am Shadow." He spun, creating a tornado of gold, red, and blue energy. "Android!" He unleashed the stored energy in a vertical column. "Crack-'em!" The blast shot straight up into space, punching a hole through the atmosphere. The backlash knocked Soldier Boy into the lake and sent Homelander skipping across the treetops like a stone. Shadow landed on one knee. His golden aura flickered and died. The V-24 was burned out. He panted, his vision graying. He looked back at the house. The Wonder Bread truck was gone. They had listened. He was alone, with two monsters. "Round 2, Shadow whispered, forcing himself to stand. The critical mass. The lake was boiling. Huge bubbles of steam rose to the surface, popping with the smell of heavy water and sulfur. Soldier Boy rose from the depths. The water around him hissed and evaporated instantly. The cracks in his skin were glowing a blinding white. He was no longer a man. He was a biological reactor in the final stages of a meltdown. Homelander hovered above the steam, his chest heaving. Blood dripped from his chin. He stared at the glowing figure in the water, then at Shadow, who was kneeling on the scorched earth, panting. "I'll kill you both!" Homelander screamed, his voice cracking. "I'll burn this whole planet down." He fired, not at Shadow, at Soldier Boy. The laser beam struck Soldier Boy's exposed reactor. It was the catalyst. Soldier Boy threw his head back and screamed, a sound that wasn't human, but the shriek of tearing metal. The energy inside him went supercritical. He began to expand, a sphere of pure annihilation growing outward. Shadow saw the math. Expansion rate, Mach 20. Thermal output, 100 million degrees. Result, total vaporization of the state. Shadow stood up. He looked at his wrists, the gold rings. "Forgive me, Maria," Shadow whispered. He crossed his arms. He grabbed the rings. Click, click. He pulled them off. The world breaker. The rings hit the dirt. They didn't make a sound. The sound was drowned out by the roar of Shadow's true power being unleashed. A pillar of chaotic energy erupted from the hedgehog. It wasn't gold, it wasn't red. It was a void, a column of absolute darkness edged in violet lightning. The gravity in the clearing reversed. Rocks, trees, and the wreckage of the helicopter floated upward into the sky. Shadow's fur turned a brilliant, pale gold. Super state achieved not by serum, but by raw, uninhibited will. He vanished. He reappeared directly in front of the exploding Soldier Boy. Shadow placed both hands on the glowing nuclear chest. "Chaos!" Shadow didn't block the explosion. He compressed it. He forced the expanding nuclear wave back into Soldier Boy's body, using a gravitational field dense enough to crush a diamond. Soldier Boy's eyes bulged. He looked at Shadow in terror. The energy had nowhere to go. It turned inward. "Control!" Shadow teleported Soldier Boy, not to safety, but directly onto Homelander. The first death, the soldier. Homelander saw the flash. He tried to fly up. Too late. Soldier Boy materialized strapped to Homelander's chest, held there by Shadow's lingering, chaotic gravity. "No!" Homelander gasped. "You're just a cheap knockoff," Soldier Boy wheezed. Detonation. The explosion happened at point-blank range. Because Shadow had compressed the blast, it didn't wipe out the Catskills. It was a shaped charge. All that nuclear fire, All that hate was directed solely into the two bodies in the sky. Soldier Boy was atomized instantly. His biology gave up. He became a streak of radioactive light, erased from existence. Homelander was not atomized, but he was broken. He fell from the sky like a meteor, trailing smoke and burning flesh. He crashed into the mud, bouncing twice before skidding to a halt at Shadow's feet. The second death, the false god. Homelander lay in the dirt. His suit was gone, burned away. His skin was a map of third-degree burns. His left arm was missing below the elbow. His hair was singed off. He tried to crawl. He dug his remaining fingers into the mud, dragging his broken body inch by inch. He looked up. Shadow stood over him. The super form had faded, leaving the hedgehog exhausted, panting, but standing tall. The inhibitor rings lay in the grass behind him. Homelander looked at Shadow. For the first time in his life, John Gilman felt true, unfiltered fear. "Please," Homelander whispered. A tear cut a track through the soot on his face. I can be better. I can..." Shadow looked down with eyes that held no pity, only the cold finality of a judge. "You had power," Shadow said softly. "You had the world, and you chose to be a bully." Homelander's eyes flared red, a last desperate attempt to laser Shadow. Shadow didn't flinch. He stepped forward. He reached down. His hand phased. Molecular vibration. He plunged his hand into Homelander's chest. Homelander gasped. The red light in his eyes flickered and died. Shadow gripped the heart, the super-dense, V-enhanced muscle that had beaten for 40 years without fear. Chaos. Snap. Shadow didn't pull it out. He simply released a pulse of chaos energy directly into the organ. Homelander's heart exploded inside his chest. The body convulsed once. Then it went still. The god of Vought died face down in the mud, crying. The third death, the puppet master. Shadow did not rest. He sensed the frequency, a high-band, encrypted satellite uplink. He looked north. 2 miles away, a stealth helicopter was running quiet, hugging the tree line. Stan Edgar was watching the vitals on his tablet flatline. Soldier Boy, terminated. Homelander, terminated. Edgar set the tablet down. He adjusted his tie. He tapped the pilot on the shoulder. "Get us to the offshore rig. We begin the rebranding phase immediately." "Yes, sir," the pilot nodded. Suddenly, the helicopter stopped moving forward. The rotor screamed, churning the air, but the machine hung suspended in the sky. Edgar looked out the window. Shadow was hovering in front of the cockpit. He wasn't glowing. He looked drained, but he was holding the landing skid with one hand, anchoring the helicopter against the thrust of the engine. Edgar sighed. He opened the side door. The wind whipped his suit. "Impressive," Edgar called out over the rotor wash. "You killed the product, but you can't kill the company, Mr. Shadow. Ideas are bulletproof. I will simply sell the narrative that you are the villain and I am the survivor. The stock will rebound." Shadow floated closer. "You mistake me for a hero," Shadow said. "Heroes put you in prison." Edgar's composure faltered for a fraction of a second. "And what are you?" Shadow raised his other hand. He pointed a finger at Edgar. "I am the inevitable Chaos Spear, a single bolt of energy, precise, surgical. It punched through the glass. It punched through Stan Edgar's chest. It punched through the seat behind him." Edgar looked down at the hole in his heart. He looked at Shadow. He tried to speak, perhaps to offer a final witty remark, but only blood came out. He slumped forward, falling out of the open door. Shadow let go of the helicopter. The body of Stan Edgar fell 2,000 feet, disappearing into the burning forest below. Shadow looked at the pilot. The pilot was shaking, hands raised. "Land," Shadow ordered, "and run." The quiet. Shadow landed in the clearing. He walked over to where his inhibitor rings lay in the dirt. They were cool to the touch now. He picked them up. Click, click. He locked his power back away. The rain began to fall again. It hissed on the burning earth. It washed over the empty spot where Soldier Boy had detonated. It washed over the broken corpse of Homelander. Shadow stood alone in the ruin of the Catskills. His communicator buzzed. It was Butcher. "Shadow, we saw the flash. Is it done?" Shadow looked at the carnage. He looked at his hands. "The bad guys are dead," Shadow said into the comms. "Vought has no head. The war is over." "And you?" Butcher asked. "You all right, son?" Shadow looked up at the gray sky. "I am tired." Shadow collapsed. The exhaustion finally took him. He fell into the mud, unconscious, as the sirens of the National Guard wailed in the distance. The silence after the storm. The Catskills were quiet. The fires had been extinguished by the torrential rain, leaving only miles of blackened, steaming earth. Butcher walked through the mud. He limped, favoring his left leg. Huey, MM, and Frenchie trailed behind him, their weapons lowered. They passed the crater where Soldier Boy had been erased. Nothing remained but a glass-smooth depression in the rock. They passed the body of Homelander. Butcher stopped for a moment. He looked down at the twisted, burned corpse of the man who had haunted his nightmares for a decade. He felt nothing. The hate was gone, replaced by a hollow exhaustion. "He looks smaller," Huey whispered, shivering. "They always do when they're dead," Butcher grunted. They found Shadow in the center of the clearing. The hedgehog was curled on his side, unconscious. His breathing was shallow. The gold rings on his wrists were dull, drained of all luminosity. He looked fragile, like a small animal that had fought a bear and won by sheer spite. "Is he?" Starlight asked, hovering down to land beside them. "Alive," Frenchie checked the pulse, "but barely. His heart rate is slow, hibernation mode." Butcher knelt. He reached into his coat and pulled out a cigar. He didn't light it. The rain would ruin it. He just chewed the end. "You crazy bastard," Butcher murmured to the sleeping hedgehog. "You actually cleaned the slate." The breach. Suddenly, the air behind them tore open. It wasn't the violent, explosive arrival of a soupy. It was a precise surgical incision in the fabric of reality. A swirling vortex of pink and white energy spiraled open, humming with a frequency that made the teeth of the boys ache. Butcher raised his rifle instinctually. "Back! We got company!" A figure stepped out of the vortex. She was anthropomorphic, like Shadow. White fur, teal eyes, and large bat-like wings folded behind her back. She wore a skin-tight combat suit with a pink heart plate, armored boots, and heavy gauntlets. She held a green Chaos emerald in her hand. It pulsed with a warm, rhythmic light. Rouge the Bat looked at the destruction. She whistled low. My, Rouge said, her voice smooth and carrying a hint of playful chastisement. "I leave him alone for 2 days, and he topples a government." She walked toward them. Her hips swayed with a natural confidence. She didn't look at the guns pointed at her. She looked at Butcher. "You can put the shooter down, handsome," Rouge winked. "I'm just here for the brooding one." The teammate. Butcher hesitated, then lowered the rifle. He recognized the look in her eyes. It wasn't the look of a monster. It was the look of a partner coming to collect their drunk friend from a bar fight. "He's all yours, love." Butcher stepped back. "He's had a long day." Rouge knelt beside Shadow. Her playful demeanor vanished for a second, replaced by genuine concern. She brushed the wet matted quills from his face. "Shadow," she whispered. "Wake up, big guy. Taxi's here." Shadow stirred. His ear twitched. One crimson eye cracked open. He focused on her face. "Rouge," his voice was a rasp. "You're late." "And you look terrible," she smiled, helping him sit up. She slotted the Chaos Emerald into a compartment on her belt. "Commander Tower was getting worried. Omega is threatening to destroy the dimension if we don't return in 5 minutes." Shadow groaned, clutching his ribs. He looked at the boys. Butcher nodded, a silent salute. "The world is yours now," Shadow said to them. "Do not let another Vought rise." "Not on my watch," Butcher promised. "We'll keep the garden weeded." The departure. Rouge wrapped Shadow's arm around her shoulder. She bore his weight easily, despite her size. "Let's go home, Shadow," Rouge said. "I found a place that makes excellent coffee beans on the way here. You need the caffeine." Shadow managed a faint smirk. They turned toward the portal. "Oi!" Butcher called out one last time. Shadow stopped. "Thanks," Butcher said. It was the most honest thing he had ever said. Shadow didn't look back. He just raised a hand in a lazy wave. "Chaos control." Rouge triggered the emerald. The pink vortex enveloped them. In a flash of light and a gust of wind that smelled of sweet perfume, they were gone. The portal snapped shut. The boys were left alone in the rain. So, Huey exhaled, looking at the dead body of Homelander and the empty space where the hedgehog had been. "What do we do now?" Butcher spat the cigar out. He looked at the horizon, where the sun was just starting to break through the storm clouds. "Now?" Butcher smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. "Now we go get a pint." Epilogue: The Ark. Location: Space Colony. Ark reconstructed. Orbiting Earth. Prime Dimension. Shadow sat on the edge of the observation deck, looking down at his blue planet. He held a cup of black coffee. He was bandaged, bruised and sore, but whole. Rouge leaned against the console behind him, typing up the mission report. "So," Rouge said, not looking up, "did you find what you were looking for? A challenge?" Shadow took a sip. He watched the clouds drift over the continents. He thought of the false gods, the men in suits, the fear in the eyes of the people he saved. "No," Shadow replied quietly. "I found a reminder." "A reminder of what?" Shadow stood up. He walked to the window, his reflection superimposed over the world he had sworn to protect. "That even in a world without emeralds," Shadow said, his eyes narrowing with resolve, "I am still the ultimate life form." He turned away from the window. "Omega," Shadow commanded the waiting robot. "Begin training simulation level 9. I need to get stronger." The narrative thread has reached its terminus. The current timeline stabilizes, and the audio transmission ends here. But the portal never truly closes. It only waits for the next divergence. To ensure you are present when reality fractures again, you must align with the signal. Subscribe to What If Portal Comics. It is the only way to guarantee your passage into the next chapter. The archives are vast, and another world is already waiting for your observation on the screen. The next jump is yours to make. For now, let the static fade. Enjoy the music in this moment of stillness while you decide your next destination. See you in the next reality.